The entire history of Israel in the 20th and 21st centuries can be seen as a struggle for existence, punctuated by brief periods of relative calm. Over time, the faces of Israel's enemies have changed like patterns in a kaleidoscope, but the fundamental challenges have remained. One comparison that comes to mind is with the planet Pyrrhus from Harry Harrison's book, Death World, where everything in the environment seems bent on killing the humans living there. However, these humans evolve into superhumans to prevent their extinction. Similarly, Israel, surrounded by hostile neighbors, many of whom secretly or openly wish for the destruction of the Jewish state, has had to continually evolve to survive. Some enemies harbor monstrous plans that, if realized, would shake the world with horror. Yet Israel will endure, defiantly and resolutely. There was a moment, not too long ago by historical standards, when this ancient state could have disappeared from the map of the world once again, perhaps forever. This moment is known as the Yom Kippur War. The cause of this critical moment was the euphoria and arrogance of Israel at that time. After the victory in the Six-Day War of 1967, Israelis were confident that no Arab country in the region could attack them. The government, led by the legendary Golda Meir, had no doubt in the strength of their army and intelligence services. The Mossad, which hunted down Nazis and Palestinian radicals, was gaining a reputation as one of the strongest intelligence agencies in the world. But the first alarm bell rang during the Munich Olympics, where the intelligence services failed to detect the preparations for a terrorist attack. Despite this, after the brilliant and swift Operation Spring of Youth, the self-confidence of the Israeli government only grew. Ehud Barak, who was then the commander of the special forces that carried out the raid in Beirut, eliminating numerous terrorists, later said that the arrogance of those days had catastrophic consequences for the entire country. Here are his words. Looking back, it seems to me that when we returned from Beirut that night, the country's leadership drew the wrong conclusions from the operation's success. This bred unfounded overconfidence. It was a mistake to extrapolate the results of a narrowly focused operation to the combat readiness of an entire army. Chief of Staff Moshe Dayan, in an interview given to Israeli journalists in 1973, confidently and casually reflected, "Our military potential is greater than that of the Arab countries surrounding Israel. If anything happens, intelligence will warn us in advance of an attack, and within 48 hours, the IDF will be mobilized and will be a fist capable of knocking out the teeth of any enemy." Golda Meir received numerous reports that Egypt and Syria were preparing to attack, but she, a woman usually endowed with a sixth sense, dismissed them. The King of Jordan warned her 3 months in advance, saying, "The strike will be terrible. The Russians are supplying Syria with tanks." Golda responded with irony to his warnings. And then came the morning of Yom Kippur, the first of 2 terrible days in modern history. Many years later, in 2023, after the attack by Hamas, said they felt a sense of déjà vu. But in 2023, there were no warnings from intelligence. No one knew about the impending strike. In 1973, there were so many warnings that not all of them reached the government. The Egyptian assault on Sinai and the Syrian attack from the Golan Heights were part of far-reaching plans. The attackers aimed to occupy as much territory as possible, with the ultimate goal of erasing the hated state. While the Egyptians were confident, the Syrians, led by Hafez al-Assad, father of Syria's current dictator, were prepared to go to extreme lengths against the Jews. The country was paralyzed with fear. The Arabs were advancing, seeking revenge for past, both real and imagined, grievances. They encountered little resistance. Israel was defenseless that day. The Syrians, intent on sowing terror, executed Israeli reservists who had been captured before they even understood what was happening. Columns of Egyptian tanks scraped the rocky soil of Sinai as they moved towards Eilat. Golda Meir later admitted that those were the hardest days of her life, and that she would never forgive herself for the reckless disregard of the danger. But that was later. At the moment, there were 30 or 40 hours left before the country would be crushed. And then a miracle happened. Through titanic efforts, Israel managed to halt the invading armies and drive them back. There were huge losses on both sides. Then, for 17 days, Israel counterattacked. The army, displaying incredible bravery, pushed the enemy back with superhuman effort. Then came the 4-day march to Damascus. The Arabs fought desperately, but it was of little help. The United States and the Soviet Union, fearing the start of a nuclear war, intervened, and Israeli tanks on full throttle stopped just a few kilometers from the Syrian capital. A ceasefire was declared. The state had been on the brink of the abyss. Everyone understood this. And then came the time of reckoning. The people demanded that those responsible for the monumental failure be held accountable. Demonstrations turned into riots in all the major cities. The culprits were identified. It was the military leadership. They resigned in disgrace. Mir, feeling guilty, still could not find the strength to publicly admit it. Israel struggled to recover, but the lesson was learned. For the next 50 years, there would be no intelligence failures of this magnitude. Until, on an October morning in 2023, the screams of horror from residents of kibbutzim in southern Israel, being slaughtered by bloodthirsty fanatics as if they had come from the Middle Ages, shattered the calm. But Israel managed to respond. And it always will. Israel will overcome the hatred of those who wish to see this country in flames and its cities in ruins.